Okay, so we figured out in part one of this small tutorial that there was a couple of things that we needed to fix. So the first one is the fact that every time we run this, we don't just get one password generated down here. We get, well, as many as there are characters in this string. So we don't really want that. We've also got a couple of issues with errors being generated when we type in anything that's a number larger than the number of characters in our string. And we also have an issue if we type in a character that it doesn't understand as an integer, like the letter V, for example. It doesn't know how it can calculate a random sample of numbers based on V, because V doesn't mean anything. It's not an integer. So we need to fix all of those issues so that we can get this program to work properly. So the first thing I want to do is extend this out to make this password generator give us some passwords that are better than what we've currently got. And I'm just going to add the lowercase alphabet onto the end here. Okay, so now we've got a combination of uppercase, lowercase, and special characters, and you can add a few more in if you want to. Now, we've got a bit of a problem now because we're going to have to count these, all these characters, because we don't know how long it is. And what we want to be able to do maybe here is add another message that says you can only have a password that's up to X number of characters long. Now, we can get around the error, but we might want to prompt the person to actually tell us in the first place, don't type in a number longer than the password generator is going to be able to handle. So what we could do is just here is just add an extra little line of text for the user to be able to kind of understand what's going on here. So I want to be able to enter a number between, okay, however many characters there are just here. So we don't want a password maybe that's less than 8. So we might want to say to them, put in something less than 8, but it will allow us to put in anything, that we've told it to on this random sample. So we could just say enter a number between 1 and however many numbers is in this string here. So the first thing we need to figure out is, well, how do we find that out? Now, there is a built-in feature that Python has called len. Now, what we can do is if we print len and then the string we want to count, which is called characters, if we print len characters, what that will tell us is how many characters are in that string. So currently there's 72. So that's great. Now we don't need this anymore, but it could become useful to us if we extend it out later on. So we'll just comment it out for now. So we want to enter a number between 1 and 72. Okay, now we might have to come back and tweak that later on if it throws an error, but we can certainly now ask people print in a number between 1 and 72. And if I type in the number 72, does that work? It does. But again, it's still running through every single one. So now we're getting 72 character passwords, but we're getting 72 of them because it's looping through all of these every single time. How do we do that? Well, it is doing what it's supposed to do because it is a function of this for loop. So we've told it basically to print I, and every time it counts each of these, it generates this random set of characters, and it does it for the number of characters that are in the string. So Python's doing what we're telling it to. What we need to do is get it to only run that once by converting this into a function. and then we just call that function once. Now, we did look very briefly earlier at how functions work. So what we're going to have to do up the top here is define the function. And we do that by using def, whatever we want to call the function, and then open and closed brackets. Now, we can pass parameters into these brackets, but we don't need to for this. We just need it to give our function a name. Okay, so I'm going to take this length here, and I'm going to put that into my function. So it is part of the function that the length is defined. Okay, if they get something wrong, we want it to print this again because we want to run it through that kind of set of instructions again. So now we want to move all of this because we also want this in our function. I need to make sure that this is indented, that this is indented, and that this is indented, because these are all part of my function. So define the function, call it password, figure out the input for the length, then run through the for loop, and then we want it to maybe extend this out a little bit so that it looks a bit tidier for the user. So we're going to say your password is, okay, and then we're just going to tell it to print a space just here, and then a comma, and then whatever I is just here. Okay, so this should work slightly better for us. Now, how do we call that function? We just type the name of the function underneath here. So let's see if this works. So run this, enter a number between 1 and 72. Okay, that's what it's telling us to do here. How long do you want your password in numbers? That's getting that from here. And now it's going to run through once we type a number in. So I'll have a 67 character. Okay, your password is, and it runs through that basically 100 times. Right, what we need to do is move this out of the loop. So it's no longer indented, it's no longer part of the for loop. This time when we run it, 67 characters, it just runs that for loop just that one time as part of this single function. So it's given us a 67 character long password, but it's only running the function the one time because we're not telling it to print as part of the loop. We still need to deal with the issue of the potential error message that we could get if we type in something that's too long. And we also get an error if we type in something that isn't a number. So if you look down the bottom here, you'll see it's telling us that we have what's called a value error. In this case, integers can't be calculated, integers need to be base 10. But yeah, so what we've got is we've got y. That's not a number. It's not a decimal number. It's not base 10. It can't do anything with that. It doesn't understand it, so it throws an error on line 9 and on line 14. So we can use something built into Python that deals with value errors. And it's really pretty simple to do. And once you learn how to do this, you'll find that you'll be using it all the time to deal with these errors. Okay, so this is fine. This is working. This is all great. And everything else underneath that is also fine. But what we need here is we need to tell it to try something. And if it throws an error, then to accept that error. So we need to say try, and then we need to make sure we fix our indentation. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We want this in there as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So this time it's going to try running this, but if it throws an error, we want to tell it what to do. So what we can do here, in line with the try, because it's part of the same thing, is we have something called accept. So try and accept work together. It's just part of the code. But now what do we want to accept? Well, we want to accept a value error because that's what we're getting at the bottom just here. Look, value error. Now, there are other types of error and it won't deal with those, but we've only got an issue with value errors. So we can just tell it to try this. And if we get a value error, then just do something else. So what do we want? Well, we want to tell it to print something else, okay? Because this clearly isn't going to work. So rather than it just throw an error, this time it will find the error and it will print this message instead. Try again, okay? Must be a number, something like that. Or must be a number between 1 and 72 or something along those lines. Now, this is fine. This will kind of work for us. How long do you want your password to be? 54 characters. Enter. Brilliant. That's my password. Thank you very much. Job done. Now, what if we type a letter in? Oh, okay. We have trace block call, recent string, internal. And now I've added the call to the function again, just at the end here, because obviously I want it to go back to the beginning at this point. So when we run it and it throws the error, we want then that to go back and type how long do you want your password to be again, just here. Now, we might find that we still get an issue with letters. So if I type a letter in, okay, it's still giving me an error here because it's because of where it's converting it to an integer. So the easiest way around that is to get rid of this. And instead of converting it to an integer here, convert it to an integer just here. So now the logic of that is it doesn't matter what you type in the input, that can just be a string. It runs through the characters and then it joins them together, but it converts the input length to a string just here. And then it prints the password, including whatever the sample is. And then it runs through the value error. So let's try that again. So this time if I choose you, it says, oh no, that doesn't work. Okay, so sometimes with these things, you just have to kind of figure out the logic of when things happen. And if it doesn't work for you the first time, you just have to tweak it. Sometimes the assistant can help. Sometimes you just have to kind of work through line by line, figure out where it's not working, and then fix it. Now, the last thing we could do is take this print and put also that maybe into here. So if I just cut that out, paste that into there. Now it will just, every time we run it, it'll run that again. So if we type something in that's incorrect, we get enter a number again, and we get how long do you want it to be. So that basically is the program finished. So we've used the random library, we've used a string, we've defined that with a variable, we've ran a function here, and then again here. We've printed some things within that function. We've got a for loop running. We've got some error checking with the try and accept value error. We've got a change here to the input to a whole number from a string, and we've got some error messages coming up with some line breaks. So there's quite a lot in this for a little program,